Hello all Reddit. This story will surprise you. I suggest you read it to the end. More than 8 years ago, I proposed to marry my girlfriend. She was pregnant at the time. There was nothing left for me to do but get married. A lot of things changed in my life at that time. I dropped out of school and went to work outside of my profession. My wife trained as a hairdresser and even opened her own hairdressing salon. We had another baby and everything was going great in our lives. We were fine with everything about each other, except for one thing. We weren't fine with each other in bed. Our adult affairs in bed were not to our liking for either of us. I knew she was imagining other men during it. She was already at that point contemplating cheating on me. I was only guessing about it at the time, but I didn't notice the cheating. Many times I refused intimacy in bed, and she got very angry about it. I tried my best, but I could not cope with her fantasy. I often think back to the time when we first met. Back then, we were doing fine in that respect. We were young, energetic. Now there are a lot of things we can hardly cope with. Work, kids, household chores. All that took a lot of energy. Lately we have had an unusual hobby. When we put the kids to bed, we would close up on the balcony and sit in an armchair looking up at the sky and dreaming about the future. I would tell her what I was dreaming about, and she would tell me what she was dreaming about. We listened intently to each other and enjoyed those moments. What do you think would have happened if we had separated when we were young? My wife asked. I answered that I wouldn't have dropped out of school and worked in my field of study. And she said she would have moved to the big city as she always wanted to. I said I didn't regret starting a relationship with her. I would have accomplished a lot less on my own than I have now. At work, my wife always ate lunch at the coffee shop. That day, all the tables were taken. A brutal man walked into the cafe and asked permission to sit at a table. She didn't even look at him and consented. At this point, she was reading a book and didn't want to be distracted from reading. She didn't care who sat at the table. She could see from a side eye that a neighbor, who was sitting at the table, was watching her, and she was uncomfortable. She abruptly closed the book and decided to look her neighbor in the eye. She liked him immediately. A handsome, sturdy man. He asked why she had stopped reading. She said she didn't like being watched. She was about to leave when the stranger held out his hand and asked her to stay. His radiant smile made my wife stay. She imagined in her head lying in bed with this man. The man said his name and asked what book she was reading. When their conversation was coming to an end, he asked her for her phone number. Without a second thought, she dictated her number. They saw each other more often after that meeting. The man came to the cafe every time and talked to my wife. They started spending more and more time and going somewhere. He would take her to a hotel that he rented for a couple of hours. He'd take her to his house or just somewhere out of town. Because of this lover, she began to run out of time to serve clients at the barber shop. So she decided to cut back on her time with her lover and started spending more time with clients. When they met, the wife honestly told the stranger that she had a husband and 2 children. He did not react to this in any way and was okay with it. I did not know this at the time, so I felt at ease. My wife did not tell me that she had a lover. A few weeks later, I began to suspect something. My wife used to demand intimacy in bed almost every day, but now she stopped doing it. I began to wonder if she was seeing someone. I decided to ask her what the problem was. When I asked her the question, she became visibly nervous and did not immediately begin to answer. She said some nonsense, and I believed her. She said that she had gone to the hospital and the doctor had prescribed her pills which had the side effect of decreased desire to spend time in bed with a man. She pulled out some pills from her bag and showed them to me. I didn't even bother to read the names of the pills and believed her. One day, I drove to my wife's office to pick up our oldest child's phone. When I arrived at work, my wife wasn't there. I asked a co-worker and she said her wife had gone out to lunch and would be back soon. I decided to wait for her at work and not disturb her with calls. I went out on the porch and smoked a cigarette. A few minutes passed and I saw a car pull up to the barber shop. My wife and an unknown man going out of the car. She kissed him and started hugging him. When I saw this, I threw out my cigarette and clenched my fists. I cannot describe what I felt at that moment. I immediately ran up to her lover and confronted him. He grabbed his arm and started screaming in pain. My wife ran up to me and tried to pull me away from her lover. I didn't continue the fight and just let the poor guy go. When my wife was sure the lover wasn't badly hurt, she came toward me. I didn't look her in the eye and angrily said, "Our daughter left her phone in your car. Let me get it." I opened the car, took the phone and silently drove away. I got home and went straight to the balcony. I sat there for a long time and remembered everything that had happened. Evening came and my wife came home. She came to the balcony and sat across from me. At first we were silent for a long time, but then my wife broke the silence. She started to tell me what had happened. She tried not to accuse me of cheating on her. I listened to her in silence and stood up with my hands in my pockets. I didn't help her out of a chair like I usually did. I walked out of the balcony and closed the door. Then I gathered my things and left the house. Our children couldn't believe we were getting a divorce. Our oldest daughter blamed Mom for what she had done. She resented her. A few months went by and I found out that her lover had moved in to live with her. I didn't take all the stuff from her house. It was about 3 years later and I found out she was pregnant by her lover. I immediately went to her house and got all my stuff. Her lover, after he found out she was pregnant, left her. She was left alone with 2 children and her hair salon. How she had time for everything, I don't know. Sometimes I had thoughts of forgiving her, but I immediately told myself, no, I would never forgive cheating and I would never go back to my wife. Would you forgive your wife for cheating on you? Was it the right thing to do? Write your opinion in the comments.